Okay, for reference, the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because of the Pecha Kucha talk of you following this process of dreams and how dreams inspired all of the like a lot of major artworks and developmental technology changes and things like that. And I was just so captivated by that because I'm a dreamer and I really not just
Wow.
enjoy dreaming, but I love looking into it and finding these ways that my subconscious communicates with me and knows more than me or helps me process through things in really abstract and strange ways a lot of the time. Um, so,
Mm.
I guess I should introduce you, or you
Yeah,
can introduce yourself. Anil Chattergoon, right?
that's
Um,
correct. Yes.
okay, yeah. And if you want, you can give maybe a brief representation of who you are, um, just for a moment. Yeah.
No worries. So you got the name correct. So my role is in finance. So as a controller, I work in government as a controller. Finance has always been my background. I've worked in different sectors and industries and in different countries as well. So, it's very, very interesting. Bermuda as well has added, I think to that
Mm.
experience. It has also added, I think, in terms of the subconscious part as well. In the sense that in Bermuda, there were things that, I decided I wanted to do. So Pecha Kucha being one of them, but even like writing plays or,
Mm.
just writing poetry or anything in that way, it kind of opens a different area of the subconscious. Photography being another one that I really open quite a bit in Bermuda as well, which is another area of basically opening the subconscious. So like I've said in the actual presentation, I've dreamt as much as I could remember, and from a very early age. It wasn't only never thought that they were that significant until I started to realize there were patterns happening all the time. And then I kind of take a bit note, even when I didn't know what the patterns were, started to realize, I started to put two and two together and say, hey, I dreamt that. And then I saw that after, and there must be some relevance in things. And, generally having conversations with people would either brush it up and say, oh, no, it's just pure coincidence. And then I realized dream after dream, it keeps happening, or it happens to other people too. I'm like, okay, we can't dismiss this as easily as we would think, or rationally as we would think, because something is happening behind the scenes, which I think is really where the subconscious part comes alive. And I do think that a lot of times we kind of put the conscious in the foreground and see the subconscious back. So it has like it's on a shift basis. So during the day, the conscious is
Mm.
actually always operating. And then the night shift, or as we say, the second job or the third job, it pops in and then it starts to work. But then we suppress that part of it. When we wake up, we get a missed version of it. So like a piece in it's just because it's a dream. So it's not tangible. It's not something, it's not a piece of paper. It's not something that's going to last for all of eternity. It's like a mist. The minute we wake up, it starts to disappear, and we're like, okay, well, we pay attention to the conscious world that we wake up in now, and we dismiss the dream. And if we keep doing that, and then sometimes we remember pieces of it, and then sometimes a piece of that comes to pass, or it becomes a deja vu moment, and then we suddenly pop up and like, hey, wait a minute, I know that happened to me before, but I couldn't figure out where. And then you realize, hey, I dreamt that. And you're like, well, okay, if I keep doing that, then there must be something more to it that, than what it really is. It's not just a dream, no, it's a piece of reality. It's just a piece of reality that hasn't come yet to pass at that time of the dream.
Right.
So my experience has always been, in that kind of dream world for as long as I could remember.
And I did talk to you at the end of that presentation for a moment about my experiences with deja vu, which we'll get into in a bit. But I did also want to ask you, I found it really interesting in your talk that you mentioned your relationship with your mother and how that was a really big part, you guys sharing your dreams with each other and interpreting them. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, I mean, this was the important thing, like I was saying there, that a lot of people get the dreams but dismiss them. But in my case, because I had my mom there, and my mom would get similar types of dreams. We would say like we are dreamers. So she would always just had those dreams. And then growing up, I just suddenly realized I would go to her and I said, I had this dream. And then she'll explain it to me what it actually means. And then over time, we kind of come to the point where even if I live somewhere else, we can still call and discuss that kind of dream. And sometimes the interesting thing is that we would get similar dreams. So if it was a premonition dream about something, I would dream the place. She might dream the people, but it was spot on. It was the same thing. It was the same event. Or we would just have so similar dreams about things happening, almost as like you get in pieces of a message. Like I sent an email. I got the top half, she got the bottom half. We put the two together and read the whole email and made sense to us. And that was what used to happen quite a bit of time. We'll just talk, and she's like, "I dreamt this. I know something bad. I don't know where." And I said, "Well, I dreamt this area." And she said, "Well, if it's that area, then it means this either this side of the family." Or it means somebody that we know in that area, and we try to like narrow it down. But I think I was very privileged. In fact, I realized how privileged it is now that I had that kind of opportunity to talk to somebody who had similar experiences but didn't shut it down.
Mm,
I think that is the major part of it. It was just so natural. It's as natural as doing homework or any other, extracurricular activity that you were doing. It just became more than a hobby, though, except that it had real promise in it. And you didn't, there was no way of, there's not like you win a trophy for it, or you're not going to be recognized for it in any form or fashion. Not like a regular hobby, not winning a cricket match, you're not winning a football match, there's no medals, you're not seeing anything. And some cases, as I discussed in the Petrus Kucha, is that the subject of what it is so heavy that even that you can't speak. So even when you do get it, sometimes you can't speak of it and you just know you can't. So it's an interesting thing to be, putting all your energy, time, and effort into something that you're not really recognized for,
mm,
but at some point you think it can help somebody else. And some parts in it you can't say the entire thing, but you might be able to drop like a word or two here or there, and just try to change the thought pattern a little bit without changing too much.
mm,
So it's like in a pond, if you say, okay, I'm gonna take a pebble and I throw it, in the middle of the pond, and it's a big one, it's going to really cause ripples all the way to the end. But you said, well, what if I throw a smaller one? The ripples will come, but it may not take to the end. But something has changed, but not much.
mm,
So that, yeah, but my mom, definitely, I always remember it. We would call, and the first thing we talked about was more than hello, hi, how you doing? Or how was your day? Was like, what did you dream last night? Did
mm,
you dream? And what was your dream? And she will explain hers to me, and then I'll interpret it, and then I'll explain mine to her, and she will try to interpret it because some of our dreams were a little different from the others.
mm,
But I generally found that my dreams were more in different planes. So like more outer worldly kind of stuff as opposed to hers. But the interesting thing is that we wouldn't, I would say this, I can't remember a single dream that she had that did not come to pass.
mm. Wow.
And then I noticed that. So he said, if I could vouch for somebody else doing this and it works, then if I'm getting similar stuff, then that means I have confidence, and I have faith that whatever is happening will happen for the good,
Mm,
whatever that is, because I don't know what it is at that point in time.
sure. And how does this connect with you, or does it connect at all with any sort of like um, theological or philosophical beliefs? Because for me, for instance, like growing up, I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist church, and dreams were something that I heard also in Bible stories. Someone has a dream about something, God gives them a dream or sends them kind of visions or these premonitions, or we heard stories of prophets who would dream about something, giving a view to the future or something like that. So I always kind of had, even then, an understanding that dreams were powerful and that they meant something to the real world. Um, but through that lens, as I grown and my beliefs and my ideas about things have changed, that I realized that having that structure as a child of the openness to dreams was a really big part of that. So what was your experience with the more like philosophical side of that?
In my research that I did for the Petra Kucha, there's a lot of different like the Romans, the Greeks, the Japanese, the Chinese. A lot of them actually believed in the power of the dreams. As you mentioned, the one from in within the Bible, and I mentioned that part with the Pharaoh as well, and that
Mm-hmm.
Daniel's, Joseph, and so on. So those were in the Bible with dreams there. But also you had, within the Greeks, you had and Romans, you had the oracle at Delphi. You actually, in some areas, you had actual roles where people were given as dream interpreters, where they would either advise an emperor, a king, or maybe, or in some communities, the community itself from the dreams that they actually got. So it became more of an actual rule, which is interesting. So it might not have been in an actual, like say it's part of a religion, but it's more in addition. I mean, you may have a
A
mixture of
social
that.
role, like a social role. Yeah.
Yes, but sometimes you may have a mixture. So, like for instance, you might have a shaman who that person also plays more than one role. They'll help you interpret the dreams, but it's part of the other remit that they normally do. Whereas another one person who interprets the dreams will be like, okay, I got, you sit down and you said, so what do you think is going to happen next, and how can we prepare for it? Which is similar to the one in the Bible with Joseph and Pharaoh and so on and Daniel. My thing, because it's more based on Hinduism. So in our thing, we believe that the dreams in the religion, we believe that the dreams are a pathway between one world and the next. So that it is involves things in, for instance, if I dream I were actually taking a train, I was flying on a plane or something like that. The if you look at, Sigmund Freud or something, he would say, okay, well, either you have a desire to fly, or or there's something that you haven't fulfilled, that you're actually trying to fulfill via the dream, and we got to figure that out. But in this other religion, it would say, well, the actual method of travel is more of an astral, is more of a vehicle in itself. It's not something that you want to do, it's something you're already doing. So a bus, train, something like anything that concerns travel would just denote the actual process of the astral traveling,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., that you're traveling from one dimension to another. So it's more symbolic that way. The perspective is completely different when it comes to the two, as opposed to taking it at face value, and the other one is how symbolic it is, but what does it actually mean beyond that? And there are other things, there are other religions that actually talk. I think it was the Chinese one that talked about the soul leaves one dimension, goes to another, interacts, and then comes back with knowledge that it didn't have before. So there's those bits and pieces. Generally, also, and you mentioned it in the deja vu, and I know you'll chat with later, but there's also, I just want to mention briefly, there's also that past life portion of things in the dreams that is heavily subscribed in the religion as well. Of course, because Hindu religion has the reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
So the past life is a big part of that in the dream as well.
Right, so we can talk about that. My experience was that for well, since I was very young, there were random moments when I would dream something and then it would happen like sometimes a week later or months later, or at one point it was years later, to the point where like I remembered having the dream, but I knew I was like really little when I had it and that it came to pass much later. Um, and they were always really random moments or seemingly inconspicuous moments, that just the way I turned a corner and this chair is there and this bookshelf here, and that moment for however many seconds it lasts is the moment from the dream, and then it passes on. But then as I got older, I think it was about 2 years ago that it started. I began to have dreams, and then within a week, within a day, those moments were happening. They were causing me the deja vu feeling, but more than that, they were causing me extreme nausea. I was getting a real like sickness feeling about it. I would see the moment, and first reaction would be my stomach starting to get like tight and churning, and then I would kind of feel like I needed to vomit. Like it was very much a nauseous feeling. And so because that feeling was so horrible, I started to really loathe experiencing that deja vu. So a lot of times I would have dreams, wake up from the dream and be like, man, I hope I don't see that, like almost w wishing against it. Then the moment would happen, and all I could do in it was like sit there and just like wait for it to pass. It was a very much I would say the energy was very much about rejection. Once I felt it, I just sat there trying to like wait for it to pass. Please get out of me, like this feeling. Sometimes it was so bad. It happened once while I was driving, and I was like, this can't happen right now. Like I feel so sick. I can't even focus on the road. I can't like yeah, a horrible churning. Um, and then it developed to a fear where I was anticipating it. So sometimes I would see a moment that I had had deja vu about previously, like I had deja vu at a skate park. So every time I went to that skate park, I would remember feeling sick, and so I would start to feel it, not fully, but I would start to like feel it again. And so it just became this haunting thing to the point where I made my senior thesis about this. For me, I was talking about the experience of being, and how I felt that the deja vu, it felt like this overlapping of being. It felt like my dreams were here, and then I had the reality that I'm in, and they were trying to converge, and that was causing me like vertigo, like an incredible like spinning feeling. And so the my show itself was dealing with that, the sickness feeling at the very nature of being, like being too aware. It felt like I was becoming too aware in those moments of the fact that I was there existing, and it was like so meta that it was causing me that feeling. And it hasn't happened in a long time since then. I do still have deja vu from my dreams, but I haven't gotten nauseous from it. Kind of just like stopped happening, or got less. Um, but it was a
Mhm.
really very like important thing to me that I still don't fully understand from any of the lenses that I have tried to look at
Mhm.
it through. And it's interesting because my mother, when I first started getting these deja vu moments as a child, that she told me that it's a good sign, because it means if I'm dreaming something and then I'm following through and living it, it must mean that I'm going in the right direction. Like I'm living in path with what my subconscious is already living it. And my mother and father are big, like my mom dreamt of me before I was born. My father dreamt of my other siblings before I was born. Um, they both have had visions of things, of what my dad knew exactly what I was going to look like, what my skin tone would be like, and
Wow.
everything before I was born. And then when he saw me, he's like, "Oh yeah, just just like I thought." So I always had that also of understanding that we do dream about the future, and that it is connected to our path in a way, which I don't really understand. There's a lot of different philosophies about that path of, destiny, or the Tao, or, like these different things. So, yeah, that's kind of where I could understand it from, but I still am like, but why did it make me feel ill? Why did it cause
Yeah.
me like a true visceral pain? That's the part that kind of has always eluded me.
I mean, recall even from the teaching, so like, we had basically Sigmund Freud, we had Carl Jung, right? So we're talking about theory between them. So they're saying, Sigmund is saying that, the dreams are repressed desires, something repressed, right? And and then it comes out there. So there's an interaction between what you actually have, what you see in the actual content, the latent piece you could see and feel, and this and the subconscious part that you can't see and feel, and that's repressed. But when you go into Jung part, he talks about the difference between the collective unconscious, which is that part that we have inherited. And then he talks that there's a bridge between that and the actual what he calls archetypes. So archetypes are things that everybody experiences. So everybody who is dreamt would have had a dream of showing up to work without clothes, as an
Mhm.
example. Flying, falling, some fear that keeps repeating itself. So he says, well, these, as opposed to to Freud, he says, well, if everybody has it, then it's universal. You can't say it's per person. Their repressed desires flying. No, no, no. This is something different. So he kind of looked at things to say that there's a some sort of bridge between the personal, the unconscious, the inherited unconscious, which we could spill in over into deja vu and past lives, because
Hmm.
it's that portion that's inherited. But then now, what you're talking about, and you kind of mentioned it there, there's a with the layers, there's a juxtaposition between the internal portion of the inherited conscious and the actual will that is. So if you come in this life with a piece that already is, and now you operate in a world that's different. So there's always going to be an interplay between the two.
Hmm.
Now, if you think about the past life portion, it's quite possible that, within your own, sight, that there is in the dreams, there is that past life piece that keeps coming back up in this one to try and to give you some clues. So
Hmm.
it might be a clue. It might be you maybe had a bad experience at that rink. I'm just saying at some point, right? Maybe it wasn't a good one. Not everything has to be good, and not everything has to be
Or,
bad. But maybe it was a bad one. And then you pass by it again, and this sense of deja vu it comes like a sense of it actually recurring, except now it's in the present that when it actually happened in the past. So because you're the common denominator between the two, it's going to reactivate again,
oh,
and it's
wait,
coming back to the fore
are you
because it keeps
saying
reactivating every time.
are you saying then that my experience of deja vu is not just me having a dream of the future, but that I'm actually remembering the past and then
Could
living
be.
again?
It,
Oh,
correct. It could
interesting.
be a piece. It doesn't no deja vu's because if you look at we're dealing with past lives and we deal with lives in general, right? So time is not so much relevant, right?
Hmm. True.
But you're right. If it depends on what you believe in to what extent. So if we say reincarnation, you could have millions of past lives, as an example. So you wouldn't pinpoint life number one would be skating rink. Life number two, I went to a park. I'm
Hmm.
just saying it's not going to work. It's not that precise or whatever.
Sure.
But there's a portion of it that comes back now. And because you're getting it this time, you're thinking, well, hey, it is actually like a sliver, so to speak, of,
Hmm.
of a past experience in a past life that's coming here. The rationale in the dream is that, and if you go back to even to Freud, because he was all or Jung, they were talking that there's some sort of interaction where something has to give. So there's some kind of interplay between the two, and they have to come up with some rationale in order to move forward, some
Hmm.
reconciliation between the two. So despite as bad as it is, right, it comes for a rationale and a reason. There's a ration that comes. And it's not that, I mean, once you realize how it is, you can actually deal with it. I've spoken to people where they've gotten dreams as well. And, they're like, they said in this life, as an example, according to them, I've always had this pain or this sharp pain in here, whatever. And if they've done something called like a past life regression, right, which is where you go back into, you try to find out some information. And they were told in that session that in one lifetime, that's where they were stabbed or they were in a battle. This is what happened. And so that this kind of pain is saying is that it's like another is like something coming forward that is a remnant, so to speak, of something that was there before. And it could be the deja vu is a remnant as well. But which means that if it's not good, you're gonna have all these other feelings to come with it.
Hmm.
But I think I do get it. I think at some point, if you reconcile the two, I don't think they'll continue to be as upsetting, as they were. This is like it's coming up to the fore. So everything comes up all at once. And if it wasn't good, then it's not going to come up and be a very good experience. But I think as you kind of rationalize it a little bit, like even within the dream world. So when I was saying in the last point, when I talk about the dream journals, and I say that it applies to this as well. So if you start to write things down, like, how do I feel, what happened, and so on, at that point, typically another dream will happen, especially you, because you do have the dreams too. So another message will come, to kind of give you another message to say, hey, do you need to check something else and something else and something else. And I think you'll eventually figure out what to do because the messages are coming when you're awake and the messages are coming when you're asleep. So you put the two together, I think you'll get some direction for sure.
Hmm.
I don't know if what I said resonates at all or it makes some
No,
helps a little bit.
I see it. I see it at least in my own experience, and I think it will actually resonate with many other people as well because like in my life right now, the first thing I do when I wake up is write my dream down, and then I spend the morning figuring out what that dream meant, what were the symbolism in it, what did I feel throughout it. And I also to get even more into this, I told you about Raziel and that experience that I had, which is while I was in Italy this some months ago, I had a dream where uh I have the whole dream written down, so I kind of remember it, but like the pretty much the point of the dream was I gave birth to myself in the dream. Um I didn't know it was myself, but I gave birth to a child which named itself in the dream, and then I looked up the name in the morning. And the name very much identified with who I am. And when I told my mom about it, she was like, "It sounds like you're literally birthing a new you." And in
Right.
my dream, it was my mother and my grandmother and my aunt, who all were the ones helping me give birth. And so it was all these different steps of that. That dream was so wrought with symbolism. Like it was so every little, like there was so much detail in it that I knew it had to have some sort of very intense meaning. But when I first woke up, I had no idea what I had just experienced. And I was kind of sitting there like, what is this dream? What is this dream? And then out of nowhere, this voice, but not an auditory voice, this dialogue started in my head where and just started explaining the dream. Started saying, okay, so the reason you gave birth to at this in this way in your mother's bathroom in your childhood home and all these different things, and they helped you, and it started laying it out, and I was like, oh, that's the dream. I understand. Who just told me that? What just happened? Who just gave me that information? And the name I first heard was Azrael, um, which I looked up and I was like, oh, that's like in Christianity at least, that's like this angel of the underworld. It's like kind of like a Hades kind of angel. And
Mhm.
I thought that's really confusing. That doesn't line up. I don't know why that was the name. But then one night, this is another thing. Before I fall asleep, a lot comes to me as well. Like right before I fall asleep, there are these moments of clarity and conversation. And before I fell asleep, maybe the next night or sometime after that, I was laying there and then suddenly it was like Raziel. And I went, oh, Raziel. It wasn't Azrael. I had switched
Right.
the sound somehow. And then I looked up Raziel and found out it's like, his name literally means the mysteries of God, like exposing the mysteries of dreams. He's associated with dreams and understanding and interpretations of kind of this magical realm of subconscious. And so after that, because I've never had I've had experience I experienced the spiritual, but I had never had names of the energies, I would say, that I interact with. I never had identities. So then when I gained an identity, it felt like, oh, I have this friend I can go to and say, hey, what did this dream mean? So then it became every morning I wake up and I go on my morning walk, I go, Raziel, what was that dream? Let's talk about it. Through that experience, he actually taught me how to interpret my dreams myself. Like I realized I didn't even have to ask anymore. I could just sit down and have the same kind of way of thinking that they presented to me. Um, and so that was also an while when you gave your talk, I had just like I was in that phase of talking to Raziel and being like, this is so interesting that he's talking about dreams in this way because I honestly haven't had a conversation with another person besides my parents who has experienced dreams in a similar way to me or at least has this understanding of this much bigger world of dreams. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you and why I talked to you afterwards and was very, very curious. So
I'm
um
I'm
well,
happy. I'm happy to do that. I mean, it's obviously what you got is something like a guide. I mean, using a word very loosely, like a guide, and that person kind of then it's something that you could identify with because once you name it, then it's like you own it.
yeah.
That kind of stuff. So it's similar to the birthing until it came into being, it came into existence. You couldn't name it, you couldn't hold it, you couldn't move with it. And
Hmm.
obviously, I think, I mean, if you look at it, it represents a shift, right? So it represents a shift in a different direction. So things will obviously based on that, you may get things faster than before. Even, the fact that the guy coming into being after this, that kind of adds to that
Hmm.
significance of it. And I also found too that a lot of people who came up to me after the talk and said to me the same thing you said, that we've never had an opportunity to sit down and really have that kind of conversation about dreams at all. So because most of the thing has been, if you've gotten a dream, either, like in your case, if it's deja vu and it keeps coming, it keeps happening, then people will think, well, something's wrong with you. Not the other way around, that
Yeah.
not what you were saying, that I'm living my true life because it's actually happening one after the other, right? That's a whole different, that's the positive spin. But some people look at it the other way and says, hey, something's wrong with this picture. Or, they attempt to shut it down completely and say, well, it is just a dream.
Hmm.
Don't bother with it anymore. But when you keep having it over and over, because you also remember they're recurring dreams. They're things that happen over and over and
Yeah.
over. And I had a friend again who, before I left Bermuda, had a recurring dream. And we've never had this conversation about dreams in all the time I've known the person, which is more than 10 years. So we never had that conversation at all. And the person's about to leave the island, and I go and chat and stuff like that. We walk in the dogs, and I came back and we just generally talking. And I said, oh, well, I just mentioned a little bit about dreams, nothing major. And then she turned to me, she said, oh, I had this recurring dream and I need to get an answer. And she told me, she says, I think you might be able to help because you kind of mentioned dreams somewhere when we were walking.
Mm.
And then she mentioned the dream, and I said, oh goodness, it's a recurring dream. And I tried to explain to her. I said, it could be like Freud is saying that is something you haven't completed because it's recurring, or it might be that there are pieces in the recurring dream that you need to pay attention to, not the entire thing. So if you think of a life keep happening as in a loop, like we see like in a sci-fi show, it keeps happening in a loop, but over and over, there's a portion when it keeps repeating, some clue in there that you need to pick up that will stop the cycle. But
Mm.
unless you know how to pay attention, or in your case, how to interpret the dreams, or how to interpret the dreams to your own for your own self, that's particular to you. Because I wasn't in talk. I wasn't too much with going online and Googling. And mind you, there are books that talk about, interpretation of dream. The Chinese have a book way back when. Even Sigmund Freud had one on interpretation, dream interpretation. So there's interpretations as you go along. But my point was that unless it's particular to you and in your context, you're probably not gonna get the maximum benefit out of it
Mm.
unless you actually do that. In your case, it was a little different because then you said, okay, I have a guide and I can ask these questions and the answers will come. Where somebody else might say, well, okay, I ask again before I go to sleep. I ask a couple of questions. So what do I intend to figure out? What do I want to find out? And then I go sleep on it, literally, which is like how a lot of the big, discoveries were made.
Yeah.
People were literally sleeping on the problem or the situation, or even when they didn't know it was a problem or circumstance. And
Mm.
that's when the answer came. So sometimes we may have to just park the dreams.
Mm.
Just like you park the car, you write the book down, you get up, you write it, you put it, whatever, you go through the whole detail, and then you said, you know what? I'm going to put that aside
Mm.
deliberately. Because you're not going to get more in the extra 5 minutes trying to get into that. It's not going to come then. It's
Mm.
not meant to come then. Because if not, if that's the case, you would have gotten it right away. So
Right.
if you park it, and as you go along the day, and then that's why sometimes the deja vu now picks in, because it's the clue that happened in the dream that suddenly you see it. So you may suddenly see the color blue all over, whereas you never see the color blue in your entire life. And you're like, well, why am I suddenly see blue? I don't like blue. I don't wear blue. And you're like, but when you go back to the dream, you realize blue was a prominent color. So what does the color blue mean?
Mm.
And what does it mean to you? Because if it were to me, I would look at the color blue being associated with one of the chakras, and that chakra means something, and so on and so on. I would go that direction. But for you, that may not mean nothing at all, which is why it's kind of a little dangerous to say, we go up and we take something and one size will fit all.
Right.
So the blue for you might have a significant meaning. It might be something somebody who passed away gave you. And it might be something that you have to do for them, or something that they want you to do, or something you did with them before that suddenly now has to come back again.
Mm.
Just because of the color blue, you know.
This is leading to my next question, but I'm seeing now I don't
Yes.
I don't know how to use Zoom, but it says this meeting is running out of time, so I'm gonna start another one and we can finish. We have about 20
Sure.
minutes, if that's cool,
Yeah.
and we can
Sure.
keep
Sure.
going. Okay. So I'm gonna end this real quick and then we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. We
Yeah.
back in bit.
So
All right. I got a few more questions for you and then we can call it. Um, so as you were saying just before, you were mentioning the different contexts in which people understand dreams. And I was wondering for you personally, if you're interpreting a dream or having a conversation with someone about that, how much I- is it a mix of context? Because you're like, as you're speaking now, you're mentioning Freud and you're mentioning different things. Are you using all of the information that you've gathered and trying to understand? Or if it's a Western person, do you try to come from a Western context? Or like, how do you work around that?
That's a very interesting question, actually. And sometimes you do need a bit more than everything else. But I would go with, I mean, because, Freud didn't really like the unconscious bit. So Jung did. So I would, because I think the dreams, my belief is that the dreams is more into this, into the unconscious, the subconscious, if you call it, that. So I would go towards that sort of, I would lean into that kind of area as to where it is. But to really interpret something for somebody, that's not you. So it's a little different circumstance. You have to get the context in terms of what actually is happening with the person. So they, does it mean something to them? Have you, so they have, if you're doing it for somebody else, that's a little different. You can say, okay, have you ever had this before? What's the relationship with the people in the dream to you? Have they passed? Are they alive? So it gives a little bit more, direction before you could say, I think this might mean, but just like, you had different archetypes where some things might mean similar to you, to me, to somebody else. So there's also that portion of it that if you dream X, then I would say, well, I would lean to say it means Y, but let me see, does your personal context change this? Or does it keep it constant? So there is a bit actually trying to interpret for somebody else. So there have been in the something called dream circles where people generally, as a community, generally sit down and they basically discuss and they try to interpret. So there is something like that. In my research, I came across that in the African tradition,
Hmm.
that it was something that was done for the community. So people, it was more, besides trying to interpret the dreams and gaining something for the community and the ancestor portion of it, it was also a bonding for people within the community as well. So it kind of gave a bit more than what it is. But again, to do that, everybody's personal circumstance would be different. So, so that kind of changes, it changes a little bit as to what you're going to say. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Like there's a lot of tools at disposal to make it. But I think the point is you have to know when to bring what part in
Hmm.
based on how the person, their belief, their background. So, Freud might not apply to X because that's not, John would, and then you would say, okay, well, what else in here, applies? What do they believe in? What does the family believe in? Have they had something like this? Are there other people in the family who dream? Because I have also people who came to me to talk about the dreams as well, said to me, I'm not the only one. I've had other people, but we just never talk about it.
Hmm. Hmm. And so do you have any references for books or literature or different essays or anything that talk about dreams that you would suggest?
Well, I mean, generally, you have, if you, in the research part, when I came across would be different, even though, Freud is not necessarily looked at in that way, but he did put out a book in that time which significantly changed the way that dreams were looked at.
Hmm.
So I would say that part. The Chinese one they also mentioned, I don't have the particular name of the book, but there was a book there as well about about dreams. And also I would say, naturally, Charles Jung also had something that would work, that would look on dreams as well. So I would say there are bits and pieces out there that you could look at in terms of giving the context behind the dreams and how dreams occur. And also, I think, I think the dream journal part is the other part to try and figure out to unlock it.
Hmm.
So you have to pay attention, besides paying attention to the source data, which is like the dream, where it came from, the context, and so on and whatnot. You also have to pay attention to the other piece, the output. which is the actual dream itself. So, what does it do? Like I said in the presentation, as you know, things like colors and patterns, persons, places, situation, events,
Mm.
whether it's in Bermuda, whether it's outside of Bermuda, whether the people still alive, whether they're not, which side of the family are they on? You could be getting a dream for somebody who said, "Hey, we never had any real connection with that side of the family. Why are they popping up now?"
Mm.
So you have different things that, would make would I think so if you kind of put the beginning part and you put the ending, I think then somewhere in the middle you'll kind of get the clues to make some sense out of it all.
Mm.
But reading up books where people have interpreted dreams, I think will give you a good structure on how dreams come to part because between Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, they also were areas that they did in terms of how to kind of weave the meaning out of the dreams. So, for instance, one of them would be if we would say freehand drawing, for example. If I
Mm.
say to you, I give you a blank sheet of paper, I said, hey, take this. So you had this dream, right? You just told me it. Okay, I want you to draw whatever came to mind. So I'm trying to tease out a clue from that dream by you doing the drawing because subconscious takes over and draws something as an example.
Interesting. That's
Mhm.
that's kind of the same thing they did when I went to a psychiatrist. Was it a psycho or like a psychoanalyst or something like this? Where they make you like draw an image of a tree, and however you draw the tree, whatever state you draw it in is supposed to express how your mental state, or draw a person, draw a man, draw a woman, whatever. So that's interesting that you say that. It's kind of this play of getting yourself to not block the answers. You have to kind of let it flow
Well,
out.
well, it's really called getting yourself out of the way.
Mm,
That's
mm,
really what it is, i.e., getting your conscious self out of the way so your subconscious self can give you the clues.
mm.
That's really what you're doing there.
Yeah. And so, okay, so we have this structure. You're writing down dreams, you're trying to understand them, you're dealing with the subconscious, you're opening that conversation. What, in your opinion, how can we use our dreams? How can we then take that into our life and try to and like what way does that look to use our dreams?
But, I mean, there are messages in every dream. So sometimes the messages might be a one-off. In my dreams that I've had, sometimes they've been, somebody passed away and they came and they said, certain things need to be done. It was a one-off thing. I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And like, okay, I'll do X, Y, and Z. Or, you get a dream or premonition before somebody's passed or before something's happened. Not passing, but like an accident or so on. So it might be a one-off thing. And then you have one that, you have other things that if you make a simple change, that it changes everything. And that part would be like your dream. The burden of something, the burden or the shift
Hmm.
entirely will change everything. And that part it means, it means everything. But getting the messages from the dreams and implementing them at some point, because also my point, when you keep writing stuff down and you put in whatever, you're going to keep getting more clues. So it will provide a practical portion of it and will provide a spiritual portion of it or subconscious type thing. And you'll get two pieces of it. So one piece is, as you talked about, the opening, because the more you open in the subconscious realm, the more the messages come. And then the more the messages come, they'll come practical as well. So there's a bit of both that you kind of try together. One might come one off, one might not. Um, even if you might change certain habits, or you might, for instance, because of the dream, you say, okay, I'm going to look for somebody else to talk to about the dream. And then it changes everything. I'm going to give you a simple example that I had with just talking about changing the dream. So it was a person who I met recently that never had met before, gave them, to look at the recorded thing of the thing, and they messaged me after and they said to me, well, there was somebody who they had gotten a dream, 2, 3 days ago about the person. And the person had passed away a while ago, and they asked them to throw them, a milestone birthday party. But they only asked them like literally now. Even though they passed a long time, they only asked them now.
Hmm.
And the point was like, so what is it? Why would they ask now? And when you start asking a couple questions, like, so okay, the person that passed away, Were you present for the ceremony? Was there any sort of closure? No. So is it a portion of the dream? Practical part of it is that you have to do a closure ceremony. Like you would say, okay, I'm doing a ceremony that you would normally do for somebody who's passed, right? We're not doing it full-fledged, but you're doing your own ceremony, your own version. Because
Mm,
there's that piece with the closure. But then there's the other part where the person is coming to you in a dream, right? And saying, I want this done. So there's a bit of the both actually there, but both are practical and both are implementable. But it's interesting that should come at the same time. That was the interesting part of it. So the point is that, how do you get around this? So if you meet and chat with people about it, you might run into somebody, as in her case, that could kind of help you to
mm,
get where you're going because she says, I mean, this is not her cup of tea. She's like, I don't know what this means. But generally chatting, she says, I think looking at it, I kind of got it now. I think I kind of get that there's a rationale as to why it even happened. And now we got to fix it. If it needs fixing, that is.
mm,
So that was my little explanation as to sometimes even just chatting to other people about your dreams, what we find is that they give you insight that you can't give yourself.
mm.
That has happened, and it happens to everybody. We're blind. We have a blind spot to
With
ourselves.
everything, really, even more than
Exactly.
just
We have a
like
blind spot. You could sit down and
basically.
talk to somebody and said, I had that dream, and they will pull out one portion in there that you never thought was significant.
Mm,
And they would say, well, hey, this is the third dream you told me, and you had the color blue in it. And you're like, blue? What you talking about? And then when you check it, you've written it down, you're like, oh, they're right.
mm. So do you think from your like in your own personal belief that dreams that we go somewhere when we dream, is it like another space or is it somewhere deeper inside of ourselves or uh yeah, where do you think dreams exist?
Mm. Well, that's a very interesting one because where does the question is, where does the subconscious actually lie? That's
Mm,
really what it is because we all see ourselves, we know what the conscious is. But is the subconscious only held within that space that we think, it's within this dimensional place and it's that, or is it not? And I would think that, for that sort of thing to happen, it's probably not. Because
mm,
it's not going to fit within a specific box this size or that long or that, it's not going to, that just doesn't make proper sense to me. Because we're thinking of the conscious size. So if we start to think about energy in cells, we know in terms of the energy part, it can't be put into a box.
mm,
For energy is something that expands technically to start with. So it can fill any shape, any size, any form, whatever it is. So I would think that it is in a different place altogether.
mm,
However, it could be a different place here, right? Or it could be a different place in a past life, or it could be a different place sometimes in another plane.
mm,
Is where does it take you? Because it'll take you somewhere. So if I sit somewhere here and I'm in, say, St. George's and I dream Dockyard, it's in another place, but it's still in Bermuda.
mm,
Whereas I might dream another country, say I had relatives in Canada or somewhere and I dream them. I'm like, okay, well now it's the same Earth, but now with somebody else. Or for instance, you might go back to a past life where you were in a battle somewhere, sometime. And you're like, okay, which I mentioned is one of the examples, in the thing, a past life, that you could actually clearly find out that did exist, but you just wouldn't have known it at that time. So,
mm,
so it is where it does it take, but then where do these exist? And I don't think they exist just here, and it can't fit in that small little box. How do
mm,
we think it is?
mm. Yeah, it's I love how expansive it is and the fact that we dream every night, every time we sleep, every like it's not something that comes to an end. This is a conversation and an experience that we get to have constantly and I find it incredibly exciting. Um
Mhm.
and yeah, I think to finish
Mhm.
I think all I really wanted to do actually was I was gonna ask you if you uh wanted to share a dream you've had recently, or if I could tell you one of my recent dreams. Either way, whatever you're comfortable with. What do you think?
Um, you tell me one
I'll tell
because
you one.
yeah,
Okay.
I think that sounds more exciting.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I can tell you one. Let's see. I haven't been getting good sleep the past couple nights, so I haven't dreamt and remembered, which is really sad every time that happens. Like,
Mhm.
um, let's see. There's one that I was thinking of specifically that I wanted to tell you. Where'd it go? Oh, okay, okay. So this was on June 27th, and it stood out to me. I'm reading this one particularly because later on I did figure out what it meant. So I'm just gonna read it out and then we can talk about it. On June 27th, I dreamt that I was exploring a house with my close friend Delano, and for part of it, he was describing a video game to me. And I wasn't really that interested, but it was kind of he was describing the video game to me, and then I wandered away, and I was outside of this house, and it was super overgrown and boarded up like an abandoned house, and I kept finding bears. Like I would turn corners and there would be a bear there. And I would get really scared, like something's gonna happen. But every time I saw the bear, I knew, like I was looking at the boarded up house and I would see one little board that was out of position that I could like get into a little hidden spot. So every time I saw a bear, which was like maybe 5 or 10 times, I would see a way of escape. That was an important part of it. Um, and then, yeah, so I was finding bears around, but in each spot there was in each place there was a spot where the bear was not able to get to me. Not that they ever did come after me. It was just the understanding that there was a spot I could get away to. Um, and so I would go and continue finding different places. And the last time, Delano let my friend let the bear into where we were. And I told him like that was so dumb, dude. Like, why are you doing this? The thing's gonna hurt us. So I opened the door, which was the exit, um, and blocked it with my body to let it out. So like the bear went out, and then I blocked it with my body, holding myself in the door. But then as I let's see, as the bear left the room, it turned into a gorilla. And then I got really scared. This is something about me. I'm very scared of apes and gorilla. Anything that looks kind of human but isn't freaks me out. So monkeys, they just don't do it for me. That they have I've had dreams since I was very young of gorillas coming after me. So when the bear leaves the room, it turns into a gorilla, and so then I pull the door closed to keep it from coming in, because I'm sure it's strong enough to open the door, so I'm like trying to pull it. But then as I do that, the gorilla turns into an orphan child. And the only reason I knew the child was an orphan is because it started just like calling for its mom, um, to get it to safety, like calling in fear. Like, I'm outside, what is happening? Please help me. So, but then it was kind of in the dream, it was going back and forth. This like hybrid bear gorilla
Right.
orphan was still trying to open the door, so I'm pulling the door and trying to not let it in. And then at one point it grabbed me by the shirt, like by the neck, reaching its arm through a crack in the door that had opened. Um, and then me and Delano, my friend, was finally helping me. I don't know where he was the rest of the time, but then me and him pulled the door like tight together, and then that part of the dream just stopped. Then we moved to a place where there were sculpture inside of the house, the same house. There were these sculptures, and I really don't know how to describe them, but the sculptures represented something in the middle of being stolen. I don't know how the visual of it I have in my head, and I could try to draw it. I really haven't can't describe it well. They were very abstract, but something about them, they felt like they were almost about to fall apart. Like they were moving. They were in an action, even though they were these sculptures. And the point was that they were in the midst of being stolen. But when you touch them, an alert came out, and it would say, "Just for show, just for show." Like it would just say that, "Just for show." And so that was it. That's the dream. And that was actually the first of like three dreams I had that night. But that was the first.
Oh.
Um, and so what is your impression when you first hear that?
Mm. Well, clearly, your friend has a role to play in all of this. It's
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
he was there for a reason, and you would notice he was there for some parts and he wasn't there for some parts. So
Mm,
some parts you got to do this alone, some parts you will get help. That was very clear too. I mean,
mhm,
obviously, the fear that the fact that it turned into something that you were scared of, again, means to me, is trying to face some sort of fear. That you will have to face some sort of fear. So it doesn't come, it's not apparent at first, and then it becomes what it really is. But then you realize it's not what it is. So the fear that you're going to face isn't what it is either. It's
mm,
disguised for something else. And I mean, generally, when you deal like an orphan child and so on, because the child cries for his mother, it means clearly there is some sort of maternal portion there that adds up. So somewhere in the line, there's a rationale about the mother part that pops up a lot more than anybody than anywhere else. Um, the fact too that I mean, I think that part is more being scared of the bear when you see it and looking for a place to get away is I think more natural instinct here than it is in there. It's just something that we would look for. We'd naturally think a bear is a bear would come and get us and we will go. Well, we wouldn't want to wait to find out. Let's put it this
mhm,
way.
mhm,
So, but the fact that there was a place that you could go to means that there is always, so if there's something were to come, you do have a safe space, right? Whether you need to go into it or not is what the dream is saying.
mm,
Because at the end of the day, you didn't. You really didn't need it. The bear wasn't coming to harm you. The gorilla wasn't either. The child certainly wasn't going to do that. So none of what you were thinking was going to happen actually happened at all.
mm,
So to kind of give a different perspective altogether, it says that something that appears to be what it is not. And the fact that you were trying to like run from it or hide from it is the non-reconciliation piece that I think is popping back up again.
mm.
So it's unless you reconcile with it and find out what it is, like what does it mean? Why would you bring an orphan child? Or was it a boy or a girl?
It was a boy.
Right. See, so all that has significant meanings, like what it is. What is there some rationale in all of this that makes that adds up? And then your friend, what is he doing in all of this? Um, why is he there to start with? You
Yeah.
don't need him here. He didn't help you at all.
Yeah.
He didn't help you. You were blocking the door with your buddy. I didn't hear you say he came and he said, "Hey, I'll take over from here." He
Mm,
didn't get that part. So he didn't really pop up at all. But the fact that he's around, means that there's portions in it that he has a role to play in
mm,
whatever this is. I don't whether he'll add light to it, I'm not sure, but he'll definitely be around. But I think it's very clear in the dream that you have to figure out, what these different things mean. And if there was an aversion to it before, like again, it's going back to a past time, even now, right? Yeah, I'm talking about a present past, not a past past. So
okay.
if you go back now, we say when you're young, that was an aversion. So what's the story for that part too? Like where did that come
Yeah.
from?
So there's
You know?
always the interesting thing. When I first had this dream, I woke up and I immediately knew the point of the bears was that I always think there's this danger coming after me that I need to have a constant plan of escape, but
Mhm.
nothing is trying to come after me. The bear was not being aggressive at all. They were just there. They were just symbols and they weren't actually doing anything, but I was constantly like, okay, but I have to be ready. I have to be ready. This is something since I was a child. I had a reoccurring dream for about maybe 3 years when I maybe between like or maybe 4 years, 6 and 10, something in between there. My childhood home had a really long driveway, and in the dream, it would be me coming down the driveway to get to my front door, and something that I never saw but felt coming after me on the driveway. It's nighttime in the dream. I'm trying to get to the front door, and my hands don't work in dream logic, and I can never get in the door. But the dream would always stop, like it was like the thing's right about to get me, and then the
Yep.
dream would end. It never got me. I had that dream over and over for years. And then one night in the dream, I'm going down the driveway. It's happening again. I'm so scared. And then I think to myself, this thing is not there. what am I scared of? Like, I need to face it. I can't get in the door. I've tried to get in the door for years. I clearly will not be able to open the door. I just have to turn around and fight it. So in my dream, as my 10-year-old self, I got all my courage together, turned around, and there was nothing there. Completely nothing. And then after that, never had that dream again. Never again did it come to me. And so even as a child, I had this realization that I have a tendency to be very afraid of my imagined thing or of this thing that feels like it's going to get me. But the thing I'm afraid of is only the feeling of getting got, not anything
Yeah.
ever happening to me. Nothing has ever happened and actually attacked me. I feel the same way in my life, and I see it in my life. The things that I worry about are all these supposed anxieties, but they're never, oh, because this has happened before, I need to be wary of it. I
Yeah.
have, in fact, always been protected and always been in situations where I had a safety and I had that balance. So once I had this, I was like, oh, I know what that is. I have dreams about this all the time, and it tends to be with animals. It's pretty much always animals that are the threat nowadays. Before it was kind of like shadowy things that I never
Yeah.
saw. Now it's been either the animal is something that I'm scared of at first, and then I find out it's actually a guiding force for me. Um,
I was not
Spirit
going to
guide.
mention that to you that in other, most like a Native American Indian, so on and so on, that the animals are regarded as spirit guides themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another perspective as
Yeah,
well.
so I've had that version of it. And also recently I've had multiple dreams that involved um orphan children or children in being left alone or like in vulnerable positions, but not really in danger, just alone, just sitting
Mm,
like somewhere alone. And
mm,
my interactions with them are very intense. And actually, you're reminding me, I should go back through my journal and find the other dream I had that was about that specifically,
right.
about these
Because
children.
clearly there's a
And they
pattern
tend
when
to
regarding that.
Yes, they tend to relate to maternal, like my
Yeah.
grandmother or mother will
Yeah.
be mentioned
Mm,
or be there in the part.
mhm,
There will be the child, and it's always a young black boy, like almost
mm.
like African looking, like shaved head, like all of that. Um, and it's commonly like I'm the one who can't do anything, or like I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of watching, but I'm there, and they're probably even talking to me or calling to me, but I have no understanding of what my relationship is to that
Yeah.
person, that child, whatever. So yeah, it's super interesting and constantly diving in, but
So what I said, did that make sense to you?
no, it completely did. And as you said it, I was like, you were you were touching on exactly what I had thought and also some things that I hadn't thought about. Like, for instance, with my friend being there, but me not really needing him in the situation, but he was definitely there and part of it. He was a part of what I was doing while not being necessarily a driving force of what was going on, which actually represents my friend Delano quite well to how we interact in the world together. He is someone who is always supportive and always there around me. But in my life with everyone, I'm the one who's taking charge of the things I do, if that makes sense. I'm not very dependent on other
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
or at least try not to be, I guess. So yeah, it's thanks for listening to that. Um, Still don't really understand the sculpture part. That was like right at the end of the dream, just this sculpture that was probably like lavender bluish color and abstract kind of flowy forms. But I don't know how to describe that. I knew it was being stolen. There was no one around, but it was like the
Right.
sculpture was a sculpture of something in the midst of being stolen. And then when I tried to touch it because I thought it was being taken away, it was like, no, it's just for show. It's just for show. Like the alert was just saying, no, it's not. This is just a representation of something. It's not the thing. I guess that's kind of.
Well, that is probably the answer right there. It is only a representation of something.
Mm.
It is a representation of something else. It's not the real thing. So
Mm.
what you see and what you touch and you feel is not the real thing either.
Mm.
That to me is what it sounds like. So when you touch it, it says for sure, it's for sure, meaning that it's not permanent either.
Mm.
And it's not it's something that's just passing through. But it's telling you, but it has to do with the other piece of the dream, which something is just passing through. the mere fact that you have the animals that keep changing shapes, and then you have these things that are there but not really there either,
Mm,
suggests that both of them, are in phases that it's passing through.
yeah.
It's not permanent.
Hmm. Lovely. Well, okay, cool. Thank you so much for talking with me about that. I think we're down to our last 10 minutes of this one too, so that's a
Yeah.
good time.
I
I
just wanted to say, so I just wanted
Yeah,
to give
go
a quick
ahead.
dream of what one I had
Oh,
recently.
yes, please.
So yeah, I know. So this was a dream that, so I've grown up with, childhood. We went college. We lost contact many, 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 years ago. And when I finally got to meet him, which was when I was doing the first, after I did, well, Christmas last year, I think. And first time when I met him, he said to me, he says, tell your mom I took her advice. That was the first set of words he said to me. But he didn't know that she had passed. And I said to him, and when I explained to him, he says, oh, he said, I would have loved to meet her. So about a week ago, I had a dream where I was driving with my family and he was driving with his. And we both stopped. It was nobody else but us. And he saw it. He stopped and he recognized. And she came out and she met him.
Oh, wow.
And she chatted with him and everything. And, I mean, I could see. And then the focus in the dream was about on a mother, his mother, which, as I say, I hardly knew the guy because, I mean, I know him well, but we lost contact. So I couldn't understand why the focus on the dream was on his mother. So I was confused. I was like, okay, and I can't call my mom now. But I was like, something about this just doesn't sound like there's a different piece to this dream now. I get that part of it is that they were supposed to meet, which is what they've done. But they only did that after I met.
Hmm.
So, it's like, when I met him, then she came, not before.
Hmm.
So and then afterwards when I had this and I was confused, I was thinking about it, and then 2 days after that, actually it might have been even one day, somebody who I visited when I went for Christmas actually, and I went and I saw them and we chatted and everything and whatnot, and one day I think after that dream, just to let them know that they had passed away, their daughter messaged me right after to say that
Oh,
they passed away.
wow.
And it's a good thing that I went and I saw them when I did. And it was the same age as my mom when she passed as well. But also then I got the understanding of the dream meaning not his mother, but a mother. And then I kind of then I understood what it was really mean. It was that premonition portion of it
Hmm.
as well that was something was going to happen, and that is who it was.
Hmm.
So it was really, yeah. So again, I couldn't figure it out that part because it wasn't the actual person who passed. I never saw them, anything. But I had a feeling that there was more to the dream than just that person. And then when it came, I was like, okay, I get it now. That's what it was.
These dreams really are a conversation between everyone in that
It
way,
is. It is.
in every
Ah,
level, in all
absolutely.
time. Yeah.
Hmm. And
Wow.
again, like it doesn't matter the place, right?
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. That's awesome. Well, man, all right.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, Anil, and I hope
My
you just
pleasure.
continue to enjoy your life. And I hope next
Mhm.
time I'm in Bermuda, I'll definitely try to see you, and maybe we can share some more
Oh,
anecdotes
sure.
and whatnot. But yeah, thank you so much. And
And you could tell me more then by then because things would have
yeah,
changed.
sure, sure. I'll have more development for sure. So,
Okay.
all right. Thank you so much.
Okay. No worries.
Talk
My
to you later.
pleasure. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Awesome. Bye.